All right guys, what is up? So in today's video, we're gonna be talking about common mistakes that people make when buying their next motorcycle. All right, so I'm gonna be covering 7 common mistakes that people make. The first step is just as important as the last one, so make sure you guys stick around for this. Okay, so number 1. So this one is mainly for used bikes. If you start looking at used bikes, you're gonna see how much people lie about what they have. So just make sure you don't buy the first bike that you see. There's gonna be tons of bikes out there. Learn from the first bike that you see. So a lot of the times people see these bikes and that's all they see is the motorcycle. They just see the outside, the fairings, how cool it looks, and they get kind of tricked. They give the guy the money, they get home and they figure out, you know, there's 5 different things wrong with this bike. And you don't want to do that because that can ruin your motorcycle experience. You might have to sell the bike or whatever, and then maybe, you know, maybe motorcycles ain't for you. So don't buy the first thing you see. Make sure you're patient. There's a ton of bikes out there. If you're buying used, there's millions of bikes out there, new, whatever. So just be patient. And there's a lot of reasons why you want to do that. So you can price match, maybe you can get a better deal, or you can find a bike that's in better condition. If you look at your first bike, and then you go look at a few other bikes, and then you're like, oh, maybe that first bike was pretty good. You can always go back and buy it. And if it's gone, you know, there's a million bikes out there, so don't freak out. All right, number 2. I see people make this mistake probably more than any other mistake, especially with these kind of bikes. And that is, don't buy a bike that's way too fast for you or outside of your skill limit. You can get your license in a weekend where I'm at, literally 2 days, and go buy a 1000 if you want. Now, a lot of the times people do that, and that's a really, really big mistake for them, or they buy a bike that's way too big and too heavy for them. If you're a smaller guy, you don't want to be buying a huge bike that you can't even hold up, you know? You just don't want to buy a bike that's way too fast for you for obvious reasons, because you don't want to get hurt. So make sure that you buy the right bike for you. Don't be buying bikes that are way too fast for you. So that's gonna bring us into number 3. And guys, like I said, there's gonna be 7 things I'm gonna be talking about. We're on number 3 right now. And number 3 is don't blindly go into a bike. Basically what I mean is do your research. The reason why I bought this bike is because I researched it. I was actually looking at older bikes, same bike as this, just older bikes. And I was doing research and I was looking around and I was talking to friends that have owned this bike. Not this specific bike, this bike, but older. And I was doing research online and I saw that this bike had a lot of problems. Then I went to go look at the bikes, and again, these bikes are, you know, 16 years old, 16, 17 years old, and let alone everything else it needs. You can save money by doing research before you go buy the bike. You know, you don't want to just get into something that you don't know anything about, and then, you know, 3 months, 4 months down the road, something happens, or even earlier possibly, something happens that you could have researched but you didn't, and now you're stuck with it. Now you got to drop money into it. And do you really want to be throwing, you know, hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands into a bike that's 15, 16 years old? Me, I wouldn't. And that goes back to don't buy the first bike you see, because those were the bikes that I was looking at earlier on. I did some more research, I found something like this, and I was like, you know what, this is the bike that I want. Research is probably going to be one of the most important things out of this whole list. So research what you buy. Number 4 is really, really important as well. This kind of goes under not getting ripped off. Make sure that you value the bike correctly. And what do I mean by that? So say you're buying a used bike from a private seller. They're not always going to be right about the price. Most of the time you're going to find that these people are asking way too much for these bikes. Make sure you bring somebody with you as well. A second set of eyes is always good because you could miss something. And the way you want to value the bike is find out what the bike needs. For example, say the tires on this bike are over 10 years old. They look fine, but the tires are over 10 years old. Don't rely on them to tell you that. Sometimes they're not going to say anything until you say something. So that's why I said, make sure that you value the bike correctly. And that's going to be up to you to know what to look for. Just make sure you do your research. If you guys need help on that, I have a how to buy a used bike video. I'll put that up here if you guys want to check that out. So things add up on these bikes, man. Say you need tires and brakes. Tires for a sport bike are going to cost you like $400 or $500. Brakes are going to be expensive too. They have Brembos in the front, so that's going to be expensive on top of labor if you can't do it. So long story short is don't buy a money pit, but that's kind of up to you to value the bike correctly. Now, if you're buying from a dealership and the bike is used, typically everything's going to be up to par, the tires, the chain, the sprockets, the fluids, all that stuff, because they're a business and they care about their reputation. They don't want to be selling people motorcycles and then they're bringing them back saying, hey man, this bike needs $1,500 worth of work that I didn't know about. That's not good for the reputation. So you're probably going to pay a little bit more at a dealership because of that. So just make sure that you value the bike correctly. That's really, really important. So number 5, if you're buying a bike like this, a lot of the times when you see these bikes, people are riding these bikes fast on the highway or whatever, and insurance costs a lot of money for a bike like this. So what you're going to want to do is is call the insurance companies before you get the bike. So say I want a 600 sport bike. I'm gonna call around and see how much it is to insure a 600 sport bike. If you're buying a bike that's older and less expensive, maybe you can get away with liability, but ultimately you're probably gonna want full coverage. I actually had a friend that bought an R1 and he ended up selling the R1 because he said, this thing doesn't even make sense to own. I'm spending so much money per month in insurance, it doesn't even make sense for me to own, so I sold it. So just make sure that you know how much it's gonna cost per month, because you might call them up and hey, it's gonna be $200 a month. You might be like, you know what, this bike ain't even worth it to own. This depends on your age, your driving record, and a lot of things like that. So if it's too much money in insurance, you could buy a bike that's a little bit smaller and a little bit more friendly in insurance, possibly a cruiser, maybe a 400 sport bike or something like that, to where it's not gonna cost you a ton in insurance. You can own that and then maybe sell that, get some experience under your belt. Insurance companies like that, because these things add up real quick, man. If you need tires, brakes, the next thing you know, it's $200 in insurance. You know, you got to drop an extra grand on it for parts. So search around and figure out the insurance prices. So the next thing is, you're gonna see there's a lot of ego in motorcycles. A lot of people are gonna tell you, hey man, it ain't a 1000, or don't buy that 400, get a 600. Especially now with social media and all these things influencing people to do things. Don't buy a bike for other people. Buy the right bike for you. You don't want that bike, man. You want a 1000, you want a 600. You're gonna get sick of that, that. You gotta make the right decision for you. And that's hard with motorcycles, because a lot of people get excited. They wanna give you their opinion. And sometimes their opinion isn't always your opinion. So make sure you make the right decision for you. That kind of goes under, don't buy a bike that's outside of your skill limit, and don't buy a bike that's way too heavy for you or too big or whatever. So the last buying mistake that people make is, my budget is this, but the bike costs this, or my wife says I can only spend this. Make sure that you look at a bike that's within your budget. Don't be looking at bikes that are $5 grand more than you're looking to spend. If you're wasting your time, his time, everyone's time. So just make sure that you look at a bike within your budget, and that's not a selling point. Don't be going there saying, you know, this bike costs 8 grand. Hey, can I get it for 5 because my budget's 5 grand and my wife said I can only spend 5. That's not a selling point. That's not an excuse to lower the price, anything like that. So don't use that excuse. That doesn't affect the price, the condition, the market value, anything like that. So don't be using that excuse. All right, guys, so that's gonna wrap it up for this video. That's 7 common mistakes that people make when they're buying their next motorcycle. So if you guys got any value out of this video, make sure you guys smash the like button for me right now. That'd be pretty cool. If you guys like moto vlogs and group rides, you guys should consider subscribing. I do projects on my bike and videos like this as well. So if you guys are into that, you guys should subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.